Welcome back to the channel. Today I got Chase Campbell and Josh is here with us. We're actually going to talk about a buck or a hunt Chase had up in the Sandhill country and kind of break that hunt down a little bit and then maybe answer a few questions and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I would, if I had to guess, I didn't have the long-term history with this buck because this is the first time I started hunting this area. But if I had to estimate, I would probably say it was probably between 3 and 4 years old. I mean, like I said, it's so hard to say because I mean, he had a big body for the area. It was 145 pounds, which was that was a good weighing deer for that area. I mean, that's
Did the biologist look at him?
the biologist didn't look at this one. Because I mean, I shot him in the evening, so it was later when we got back to the check station. By the time we got him loaded up, got him back in. So it was this one he didn't get to see, but they do take the jawbones, so they look at him. He didn't get to tell me what he thought on this one.
Right.
But the one thing that we have experienced now that we've taken a few bucks out of this area is the wear on the teeth doesn't really line up with the way they're teaching these biologists to age these deer. And for example, some of the deer that we've killed more recently to where we had, for experience and, history, pictures to prove it, so this deer has got to be in the range of 5 to 7 years old. I mean, he's got to be. I mean, it could be older than that for all we know. But then when the deer biologist looked at the teeth on that one, he told us it was a 3-year-old buck.
And you had more than 3 years pictures in them?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, I didn't argue the guy, and I said, listen, I agree with what you're saying, based on what you were taught and like what they tell us to do. I said, but clearly there's not enough studies done on, maybe the southern deer of Florida, different
deer or something.
Different environments. I mean, because these deer in particular, what I've learned is that, because there's really acorns everywhere.
Yeah.
There's acorns everywhere. But I think what these deer are eating is they're actually eating because, like the scrub, the scrub that grows. Well, I think sometimes, which they love bedding in the scrub. They do. These deer, if you find an area of big scrub, that's where these deer are going to be.
That's sick. And they have feed.
Well, exactly. They have everything they need because there's a lot of foliage and stuff inside of that, but the scrub oaks produce acorns too.
Oh yeah.
Like there's acorns that grow.
On the pipeline unit, it's covered. You walk through some of them waist high scrubs, and I mean it's just thousands of acorns.
Exactly.
You can go ahead and hang that thing back up there and get a hold of it.
Yeah. So.
But was that the first registry buck you've ever killed?
That was the first registry buck I'd ever killed for Florida. Especially, because I, grew up hunting private land in Georgia. My family, none of the people I grew up hunting with hunted Florida public land.
Yeah.
So when I started hunting Florida public land, I was told all these negative things about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely, a sense of, it's different for your average guy, but you just got to enjoy it, though,
It's a learning curve for most people. It's a hard place to learn.
It is, and like what I tell people, is like the biggest thing is you gotta enjoy the whole process. You can't just expect to just
run in there and kill a big buck.
Because everybody wants to do that, man, and we all, obviously
Doesn't happen overnight.
That's the best part, but like, especially like for that deer and every deer we've ever killed on public land in Florida, man. Like there's a lot that goes into this. I mean, and
weekend ordeal.
I have guys, with the taxidermy shop, they'll hunt public land for the first year and just absolutely get lucky, kill a 120-inch deer or something, and they're like, oh, this is easy, and think they're going to do it year after year, 10 years go by and they haven't killed another one.
Exactly.
So you got to learn. If you're going to be consistent, there's a lot of learning goes into it.
Yeah.
It does, and like the process of this one, I actually found this buck, because I only had 1 year with this particular deer, but I found him in early May, so basically just when he was starting to split his G2s.
Saw him or hung cameras?
I had cameras up. I started, I put the cameras out like early May, and then by the end of May, I have a picture of him. Well, probably should have done that, but I got a picture of him where he's just splitting the G2s, and arguably, I can't say for sure that it is the same buck, but I got, I watched him develop, and everything, if you look at the spread, You know, he had the nice, pretty, even brow tines that were growing up. Everything pointed to it being the same deer. So I can't say that was for sure him, but
Yeah.
I did start
high
getting,
chance.
you know, and I had a bunch of daylight pictures up until before the season began. You know, I mean, it was, you know, kind of from different spots. I mean, I had like a triangle of cameras hung where I was first getting him. Here's where I first found him, and I started getting him down here a little bit. You know, probably.
How far apart are you talking?
Well, the first year I started hunting this area, you know, obviously I wasn't as spread out as I am now. Because, like, now I can tell you right now, like I tell people that, like, my cameras are spread out over 3 to 5,000 acres.
Yeah.
And I've measured that on the map.
That's a big area.
And I had to do that because the first year that I started hunting this area, yes, I was getting pictures of that buck, but there were several other mature bucks in the area that I had on camera with him early season, but then as soon as they lost their velvet, they were gone. I couldn't keep up with them. You know what I mean? So that was when it all began. You know, when I started finding the history with all these other bucks that we, you know, some of them, you know, one, you know, is dead now, but then there's still some that we still haven't killed.
Yeah, because y'all killed another. Your brother killed another real nice buck right there where that one was, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and so he ended up killing the other buck. You know, not obviously in the same area that I, you know,
Not the same bedding area.
not the same bedding area that I killed that one, but I jumped the buck that my brother killed out of where I killed that deer. I was in there scouting one day and jumped him before season in full velvet. And remember that deer though. So that was actually it was right before season. You know, it was early September. But those deer, most of them are, you know, they're hard. You know,
there's a lot of
velvet's gone by September. Usually. So that buck, yes, he held his velvet until Thanksgiving. He did it every year. It was crazy. You know, I mean, we thought
I've got one of the house like that. He would do the same thing. And I finally moved in and hunted him, and I think I shot him on Christmas Eve day, and he still had about half his velvet hanging on his horn.
All right, and that was exactly how the one was my brother shot. But back to that one. So like I said, I had a lot of daylight pictures in the early season, but as soon as we got to the point where we were able to start hunting them, you know, and you know that WMA, it doesn't allow you to start hunting when deer season opens, but you know you just got to go when you're able to go.
Right.
So when we were able to start hunting him in there, the first morning, now this is what was crazy because I was getting a lot of pictures like of the buck my brother shot, and the buck my brother shot, he, believe it or not, he was actually way bigger the first year I seen him. Like he was like.
And you had history with him for what, 3 or 4 years or something.
3
years.
3 years, but the first year we found him, he was 125-inch bare minimum 9-point, and he was in full velvet, so he might have been 130. And I have a picture of him the week that I went to go hunt, and that was in, you know, whenever it was, you know, mid-rut, you know, whenever that buck was in full velvet. And so I was getting all excited because I'm like, man, this is crazy. Like, we got these bucks, they're daylighting leading up to when we're about to start hunting here. So got all excited, went, hunted him the first morning right there in that one spot, you know.
And this is where you've been getting daylight pictures of him?
In the early season, yes. I didn't have no daylight pictures leading up, like, close to the hunt.
Yeah, since they shed their velvet.
But I had some of them other bucks, though. So I was still excited because I was getting daylight pictures of some other big bucks, you know, in the daylight. So I was like, well, this is a good sign, you know. Like, I mean, I wasn't just dead. I mean, there was a lot of big bucks in this area. So I was, you know, I was like, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and be picky. I mean, it's Florida public land. I mean,
you know, sometimes
because I just wanted to kill my first buck on public land. You know, I mean, this was a new experience.
That was actually your first?
That was my first buck on public land. That was back in, you know, it was
come a long way since then, huh?
2020. So yeah, exactly. And I mean, granted, like I said, there was a
pretty impressive, yeah, for your first buck.
You know, there was a lot of luck involved in it, but you know, I put a lot of time into doing it. I mean, I scouted every month of the year. You know,
that's a little bit of drive for you too.
Yeah, it was, and I mean, you know, thankfully, you know, the work and the job I have, you know, it does allow me to, you know, I'm flexible with my schedule and whatnot. But it's still dedication though, man, because to go out there every month in the middle of the summer, man, and you know, just go check 6 to 8 cameras and just go scout new areas trying to find, you know, because I knew these deer, you know, you weren't just going to find one spot and that was just going to be the money spot.
Those sandhill deer have a bunch of different,
so far around.
have a bunch of different, just like where you said he was laying, and we'll get into that, but
Exactly.
there's a bunch of those little thick areas, and it becomes a waiting game a lot of times.
Right. And well, so what was crazy though is like, I mean, I couldn't believe it. It ended up coming out this way, but the first morning of going in there and hunting where I had found him, because it was the first place I found him in the early season, so I didn't really know what to expect as far as if he was still going to be in there. You know, like I said, I didn't get a bunch of daylight pictures of him, but the first morning at about between 8 and 8:30, I seen that buck 80 yards walking, like just walking a trail. Didn't look spooked, but he was just determined. You know what I mean? I didn't grunt at him or nothing
Margin.
Yeah.
because he was actually going like in the direction toward that bedding area that we later ended up finding him in, as we'll get there. But I seen him go that way, and then 20 minutes later, here came the buck that my brother ended up killing later on.
And he
You
was
know,
going the same direction.
going the same exact direction, heading the same way. And I mean, obviously,
And what time did you say that was?
that was 8:30 in the morning.
8:30,
The
yeah.
first one was
That's
like,
my favorite time. That's when I started trying to catch him going to bed.
It is.
It's generally 8:15 to 8:45 when I'm shooting.
absolutely. And so, you know, that was my first hunt. So obviously, and I mean, this
He
is
was excited.
Yeah, we can see.
I
Yeah,
was like,
first
wow.
time.
I mean, clearly I've got got
Right
something
area.
figured out, you know, and it's
Right
looking
place.
promising for me. Well, it started out kind of, on cloud nine, but then the public land started. It really kicked in because then I hunted there and I even moved a little bit closer to him to try to get on that trail.
Right.
And then I didn't see no more deer. And then
You think that was because you had your son in there, or you think that deer just moved naturally?
I think that in this particular management area and in these particular deer, I think that, especially because like I said, these were rut hunts too. So these deer were, yes, I didn't physically see bucks chasing does on this week,
You see the sun.
but there were hit scrapes everywhere. There was.
They're chasing, and they're going every which way, following does, and you can't pinpoint them out until you find that bedding area.
Exactly.
Where could it be? Yeah.
And the only thing that I could really assume, like for that morning, was those two bucks that I seen were probably trailing a hot doe that I didn't see.
Mm.
The hot doe may have came by before it got daylight, and then they were just on a trail trying to keep up with it.
Yeah, I've seen that before where it'd be like if I go in and sit down at daylight, and a lot of times I'll happen to see the doe, or maybe I'll see a doe with a young buck chasing her or something. If I stay there for 8 hours, I might see 4, 5, 6, 7 more bucks through that period, trailing that doe.
Exactly. But I mean, so what really started to really disappoint me on that one, because like I said, again, I take that back. Let me reverse a little bit. So I didn't see no more deer for 3 days after sitting that, but it was that same evening. See, I got my days mixed up, but that evening after going back in there and hunted, a guy that was scouting, he didn't even have the hunt that I had. And like,
That's a bad thing about them hunts too, is guys coming in there when it's open scouting and blowing other hunters.
The pressure, yeah.
And like,
No gates.
I do like to scout during season and during hunts, but I will tell you, I am careful and respectful because I do not want to mess anybody up. You know what I mean? Like, and I mean, that's just because, yes, I want to be successful myself, but I don't want to take success away from anybody else either.
Yeah.
Because, what if someone, and like, I'm granted, a lot of guys, especially after seeing, you just see two really nice bucks on Florida public land, the first morning of your hunt, and then you go back in there that evening and you got a guy walking all through that, and he wasn't hunting, so he probably wasn't trying to control his scent and all this.
Right.
And so that really discouraged me, because that also might have told me too that maybe that was why that, I didn't see nothing in that area again for a good amount of time. And I actually had my brothers were also hunting, within 300 yards of me. Now, granted, they hadn't scouted like I had, so I was kind of sending them in blind, but they also weren't seeing nothing. So that kind of wrapped up that week, that guy came in there. He actually did talk to my brother, and he walked right under my brother's stand. My brother was hunting a scrape, and the guy walked up, and he had a walking stick, and was like messing with the scrape. My brother's up in the tree, and he was like, "That's a nice buck made that scrape, didn't he?" Right there, and he was like, "Sure enough." you know,
Yeah.
it just. But the only thing that was to be said about that, was it was an hour before prime time. You know what I mean? The guys. I mean, if it would have been 12, 1 o'clock, we'd have never even seen the guy. 'Cause I mean, at that particular day.
I think that happens a lot too. And a lot of times, when I'm coming or going, I'm looking for foot tracks. Boot tracks.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because all it takes is one guy, and it's blown.
Blow it out, and I do think that it seemed like those bucks were using that area frequently, and they were still kind of daylighting a little bit because they were there wasn't a whole lot of pressure in there. Now I know a lot of people were obviously scouting in that area, and I wasn't like the only one hunting it. There was people hunting everywhere. But that particular spot seemed to be okay, but it definitely, once I got in there and then that happened, kind of slowed down. I was still getting pictures of them, but I was at that point. It was all nighttime. I was only getting them, I was getting that buck, the one I ended up killing 3 weeks later. I was getting him at 9 and 11 o'clock. I mean, 3 to 5 days a week. And I was like, okay, well.
And that was checking a scrape. Camera was on a scrape for trails or what?
Well, so I had 3 cameras in about a 200-yard radius, and 2 of them were on scrapes, and 1 of them was just on a trail. So I would get him working that trail. Like there was a scrape kind of this over here, and then I had another camera just on that trail over here, and I would just catch him kind of going through. And it wasn't a defined trail though. Like I tell people that hunt, that ask for advice about hunting that area.
Don't hunt the big trails.
Don't hunt the big trails because that's and the only thing that made me put a camera in this area, and I told you about this too, something that we might want to talk about is people overlooking the signs of old rub activity. Because I also believe that a lot of rubs, when people see them, they think they're a lot older than they actually are. And I've learned that because in my experience of now hunting some of these areas 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, you can go into an area in turkey season that looks like the rub's old, but you knew it was fresh in October.
Well, exactly. And then a lot of, because I've scouted with people before that have looked at like rubs and been like, yeah, man, that's a nice rub. They're like, that was 5 or 6 years ago, so there ain't no buck in here now. I'm like, I don't know, man. I mean, so that was, part of what led me to put that camera on that trail initially, but what ultimately made me put the camera right there was there was a fresh buck track in it. And this was before, it was in early May, so that was before even deer really, they were maybe coming out like nubs, but I seen a buck track. So I said, well, this is the only thing I know a buck has walked past here, so I'm going to put a camera here. And, lo and behold, it didn't really look great, but that buck, they still use that same trail 5 years later. They walk that same trail.
You can find places like that. That's why I'll keep that journal and write all that stuff down, because I have basically too much I can't remember. I have so many of them.
Exactly.
But, I mean, it's the same trail on the same dates with the same age buck, and that's stuff I run into,
Right. Like you said, if you got a known trail and then you got what looks like to be older rubs, that buck might be coming back during the rut and making those same rubs,
Well, exactly.
He might be still alive, so it's not something, hey, let's just overlook it and keep walking.
Even if it's not the same buck, anytime I find big rubs, take note of it, because if I'm looking at rubs that are almost chest high and this giant rubs, if another buck in the area reaches whatever age that buck was that made the rubs, 5, 6, 7 years old, then he's going to be doing the same thing in the same area because it's train based.
Exactly.
There's a reason why he's making those rubs on that path, and there's, you're looking around, mark it on your maps, wherever. The reason he's using that trail or that rub line. So, like you said, it's something that a lot of people overlook. You don't. You're like, man, mark that down.
Well,
you've learned with that one. All it takes is one picture to change your entire hunting season.
Oh no, exactly. And something that I think maybe a lot of people overlook too when you're trying to figure out, you're like, maybe you got one picture of this buck, or you get him in a certain spot, but he's not frequenting a lot. If you're having a hard time locating, because like in those sandhill deer, like it's almost overwhelming when you go out there, because you're like, it all looks the same. So how do you really dial down where these deer are going? Not to
interrupt you, but the advantage I found when hunting them sandhill type places, like, I put a lot of time in pipeline, is you can almost identify the age of the deer by his track. A lot of times, because they have them big old feet.
Absolutely.
And I've located probably 99% of my big bucks in those areas like that, just from finding the track.
No doubt, no doubt. But something else that really, because like back then, obviously, I was kind of new to hunting that spot. But if you fast forward to now, I mean, you know, I don't even really have to scout as much as I did,
You know where
5 years
you know
ago.
where your bedding areas are. You really just got to know what buck's in the area.
Well, exactly. And what led me, obviously I did a lot of scouting over the last 3 years, but every time I go, I didn't always like find something great. But if I was driving down the road and like two does ran out in front of me, I marked that. I dropped a pin on that on my map every time I seen a deer. And the way I look at it, especially with these deer, and like I said, I'm assuming that these deer, yes, they have several bedding areas that they probably stay in majority of the time, but I think that they're during the rut they are on a pretty regular basis using 3 to 5,000 acres, and that's why you got to try to collect if you want to consistently try to get lucky enough to find one of these bucks in the daylight.
Right.
You got to try to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, and eventually you'll see, because like when you look at like my Onyx and like my maps where I have my pins, it's like connecting the dots.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, and granted, it took me 3 to 4 years.
After that's what I was about to say. After 4 or 5 years, you'll start to see those clusters showing up, and it's like there's something going on here.
Exactly, and that's why I said that particular area. Now I still love to scout. I love going out. I mean, it's like therapy to me to go out and just be in the woods. I mean, I can't stand not being out there, but
Right.
As the older I'm getting, the more I can stand taking off summertime and not having to scout as much.
I heard
like, just like you said, you don't have to scout that area as much anymore. I have a bunch of areas like that where I really don't have to scout if I don't want to.
I don't, and I will tell you, I am a little bit concerned they're going to be burning a big portion of that area this year. So with that being said, yes, I have been running a pile of cameras in there for the last 5 years, but I'm a little bit nervous on doing that this year. And granted, I don't think it's worth the risk because, like I said,
I mean, pattern and figured out why.
Do you have any big bucks in the same area now?
Well, I have not. This is the first year.
You don't have any cameras.
This is the first year that I've hunted there.
So it'll be a true test if see if you actually got them patterned and figured out there, huh?
Exactly.
The problem, I'll do the same thing, and because I don't have. I mean, I have cameras out, but my go-to place that I'm gonna hunt as often as conditions let me this year, I have probably, I don't know, six or seven bucks over 115 inches in a single bedding area. So I mean, my chances are high, but I'm not running any cameras out there this year at all. Everything's off cameras I pulled in February.
Well, and that kind of brings up a whole other topic too, though. Not to try to stray away from what else we were talking to. It's so hard, but it's another good thing that I like to talk about with people, though, and that's another reason why I kind of want to test the theory of maybe possibly having an impact from running cameras. And I'm not saying that because yes, I have ran a lot of cell. The first year I didn't really have no cell cameras, so I was manually checking all of them.
A lot of my places don't have cell service. I can't run a cell camera.
Right, and that's a lot of these places are like that.
I only own 3 cell cameras because I'm very limited on where I can put them.
Fortunately, this place is a very cell camera friendly place, and of course, so I've utilized the cell cameras are to me a big deal out there. But I've also noticed, though, the way these mature bucks are, because I like getting videos of them too, man. I
have one camera.
Yes, it's cool
to show your buddies.
It's cool to get a picture, man. But when you get a video of him sitting there strutting and stuff, man, you got a big old 120-inch buck on camera, man. That'll get you fired up for season right there. But you see so often though how it alerts these big mature bucks though.
We're on cameras.
It'll
lock on them.
It does, man. And like, granted, I'm still gonna run them this year. I'm not gonna probably run as many, but I have maybe 5 to 6 camera locations that I know are like
the spots to get pictures.
Like that's where I'm gonna get the most pictures.
I'm doing when I'm gonna throw cameras in my bag when I go in there and hunt, and if I don't kill the buck, I'm leaving a camera.
Exactly, and that's
for the pictures. I don't need the information. I just want the picture.
Right, and that's why, like this year, I think what I'm gonna do is, because I will start hunting, some Georgia a little bit too. I'll hunt Georgia, and obviously we'll hunt Florida too in September. But probably, before I start hunting a lot in September, end of August, I'm going to go out there, put my cameras up just so I can see if, some of them older bucks that we've been hunting for, that we know are going to be maybe 7, 8, possibly older than that. I definitely want to see if they're there. But I'm also at the point where I'm just like, I don't, I've been busy with work too. So,
Right.
but, if we go back to the story of that deer, so I went back in there, on, because I hunted 3 days that first week, and then I went back in there that next week, and that was when I said, okay, I'd seen those 2 bucks. Camera slowed down a little bit. The deer sightings went down for me. I only seen those 2, and that was it. So I said, okay, we gotta switch something up. I'm not just gonna go sit there and just constantly see nothing. I ain't gonna do that. I don't believe in that. I mean, sometimes your instincts, sometimes it's necessary. I'm not going to tell anybody not to do that because patience kills. It does.
I'm not doing it.
But I know I can't do it because I know I'm like he's walking somewhere right now.
Yeah.
That buck is in these woods walking around. He's safe right now, and that drives me crazy because I'm like I'm not there to put him down. But I ended up finding another spot, and it's kind of led me, to learn more about the deer in the area because I seen a doe one morning. So that was exciting because I got to see a doe. That was my first doe sighting that I'd seen in that area. And then that evening, I seen wasn't a legal spike, but I seen a spike chasing the doe. I don't know if it was the same doe or not, but he came down on one of the ridges and chased her right there 25 yards in front of me, which, was a cool sighting, because that was also another first for me that year.
Were you filming it this time?
So I was not, but I do have camera footage of the spike chasing that doe from my phone. I took my phone out because I knew, it wasn't even, because I believe that place, man, I think that place actually has a different rule because I'm pretty sure, now don't correct me on this by the book, but I'm pretty sure it's just got to be a split. So if it's a spike and then has a fork, it's a legal buck.
Wow.
Which is a little bit different. So it's really a 3-point. As long as you're the 3-pointer or better. Don't even have to be a 10-inch.
Yeah, I think it states like have 2 or more points 1 inch length or something.
That's exactly what it is. As long as it's got basically 3 scoreable points, then it's a legal buck. Which
it's like about 90% of the bucks out there.
right. No kidding. So I seen that.
Those horn restrictions, it amazes me how a buck gets to live. To be this,
Oh, I know. It just shows how much respect you got to give them, though. You know what I mean? Like me, as much time and effort and how mad I am at hunting these deer.
You get lucky. We get lucky a couple times a year and catch him, and that that's the end of his life. But he's getting, well, not lucky, but he's avoiding us every single day.
Exactly. Yeah, no kidding.
He makes one mistake.
Right.
We get lucky once.
And even, and you can't even discredit them, too, for having to avoid the poachers and the people that'll just, they shoot them that way, too.
Constant pressure out there, especially where you hunt. You got, people just e-bikes or Jeeps
trail riding.
Or, like you said, just going off, close to vehicle access. Man, somebody's going to take their truck out there.
Exactly.
They're never not moving out there, so it's pretty impressive, like you said, to get to that age and that maturity. Because you're like, gosh, but I know I couldn't do it.
Right. But yeah. So to fast forward after that week, I seen 3 deer that week, and now granted, so that was about when I seen the 2 does in the spike. That was on the other side of the access road that we used, and it was probably roughly 1,000 yards away from where I'd been hunting and seen those bucks in the beginning, and I didn't have no camera presence in there to know, but I just kind of did some boots on the ground, during the middle of the day. And, it seemed like there was a lot of deer sign. And I did see deer. Like I said, it wasn't the deer that I wanted to see, but, there was deer, so that was kind of a step in the right direction. But anyway, if you fast forward now to the 3rd week, I went back in there because, again, like I said, I didn't have no trail cameras that year, or no cellular trail cameras. So I went back in there and manually pulled my card. And then I can see over the last week, that buck, he's there more often than not. I'm not going to say every day, but more often than not, he's there between 9 and 11 p.m. And he's always coming left to right or right to left every single time. And it was the same as when I seen him, the way the camera was angled, it was left to right when I'd seen him. So I just looked at my map. I only had a day and a half to hunt, this particular area before I was done for the year as far as archery hunting goes anyway, because that was when the gun and muzzleloader season starts to come about. So I had about a day and a half, and I went in there, on the map and I just drew a circle. I said, this looks promising. It's kind of in the direction that he's been going. It's a mile away. So I'm not, as far as I'm concerned, it could be
Yeah,
a different.
a lot of people think a mile's a long ways, but I mean that's 4 minutes of walking for a buck.
Well, and that's what
day.
I think a lot of people forget that though. That yes, it might exhaust you to walk that in summer.
Mm-hmm.
These deer live out there and they do it every day. It's nothing. It's a daily thing for them to do. Now, granted, are they doing it often in the daylight? Probably not. But they're doing it every day, no matter what, whether it's night, daytime. So I walked in there. I mentioned to y'all I got pictures of it too because I walked in there in the dark and just stumbled upon a scrape that I could just tell. I was like, man, this a deer. I didn't know what buck had hit it. I had no cameras in this area.
Right.
I said, man, a buck has been here like that night. The night, it was a morning hunt.
It's still smelling in the scrape.
Oh, absolutely. And I got to know this. I do, man. I'm crazy about that. Man. I will say, I walk into an area like that, man.
That's a 5-year-old.
No, I'm telling you, man. I'll be like, okay, there's been a buck here in the last hour. Like, I will say, man, I smell them.
And a lot of times when I'm, like you were talking about scouting in the middle of the day, I'll slip hunt, scout in the middle of the day, and I'll catch that wind right, and a lot of times I can smell them before I see them.
Exactly.
I'll smell them, especially in an area, like a bed area where there's multiple bucks using. That thing stinks so bad you smell it from 500 yards.
It's strong, but that's probably the worst, best smell that I think I had. So that's one of my favorite. It gets me jacked up, to say the least. But, so I walked in there, and, I seen that scrape, and I said, well, I'm just going to hunt right here. I didn't, because it was so fresh. I was afraid that if I kept going, I was unfamiliar with this area, so I didn't know what exactly the terrain looked like other than just looking at it on the map. So I was unfamiliar with it, so I hunted right then and there. Didn't see a thing that morning, but I got down kind of early, and I said, well, I say early. Early to me is 9:30.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I try not to get down before 10.
Well, I know, and that's, like I said, I didn't go and walk around. I just kind of wanted to examine the, around that scrape. Because like I said, I walked in there and it was dark, so I didn't even hardly get to set up. I just set up in a random spot. It was a terrible setup. And like I said, I didn't just go walking a long ways right then and there, but I kind of just milled around and wanted to see all that. Well, then, I've seen all them buck tracks that were ultimately leading,
You could tell it was multiple deer, not the same one.
So there was multiple deer, but there was only one that was sizable. That was appeared to be a big buck track. So there was definitely a couple deer, and they were going both ways too. There was fresh tracks, the freshest ones were going back toward that bedding area that we talked about. But they were going both ways there, the track. So you could tell they had been using that trail frequently. So I ended up, like I said, as the day got on, I just followed that trail up. Maybe. I hadn't mapped it out in a while, but I ended up walking from that location probably roughly 400 to 600 yards. I'm just guessing, at that point, but it was roughly that range. I mentioned to y'all that I did find a tree stand that was older. It was an older stand. Nobody was in it.
Close to where you were hunting too. Wow.
It was pretty close. It was. I know, and that's public land. That's another reason why you definitely you got to be respectful to people. Stuff happens. People have emergencies and whatnot, but it's why you always want to try to do the right thing, even if it might not seem like it might not be what you want to do. It's just respect. But I did. So I just kept walking past this tree stand because the trail just went right on by it. And like I said, it appeared to be old. And I find a lot of old tree stands though. And it's just if I meet a guy. Or I find someone that's hunting that, I always want to try to discuss with them, hey, what do y'all know? Y'all talked about that a little bit too, try to at least coordinate with them, be so that way you can, hunt the area together. You know what I mean? It's, we're archery hunting, so we ain't got to be all 1,000 yards apart, but at least, acknowledge each other.
Yeah, at least you're not in line messing people up, messing each other up.
Exactly. Right. So I went on, I went another 100 yards past that tree stand. And as when it kind of started to thicken up a little bit, the oak trees kind of it was cool because it kind of made a V to where the trail kind of went into the V and then it got real thicker, on the edge of it.
Down.
But it just kind of, I wouldn't really call it a funnel. It looked like a funnel, but
the deer funneled down.
The deer used it as a funnel.
Right.
But yeah.
That's the type of funnels I'll hunt. When people talk about hunting funnels, they're hunting places they can see on a map. But the funnels I'm hunting are actually, deer treating them like funnels, but it may just be just a slight terrain feature.
Right, exactly. And it's, and ultimately it's, in my experience in these areas, that a lot of these deer are using these particular areas because they're the least pressured. A lot of times these bucks are going to be in the most unfavorable areas, and that's because everyone's going to go to the prettiest oak hammock.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's going to go where they immediately find water. Anything.
Or where the deer are spending all their nighttime time because the sign's there, the picture, they're getting pictures, and that's what people.
And that's, if a deer is, it kind of makes sense if you think about it. If a deer is walking more at night, he's probably going to put more rubs in a more broadcasted area, if he's just walking around, he's pissed off that
night. In
night.
all my years of hunting, I can only think of seeing 2 bucks rub a tree. Actually physically watching bucks rub a tree. I can only think of seeing 2 do it.
I think I'm right there with you too. I've seen 2.
Very few, yeah.
Never in Florida.
Granted, one of them was a 160-inch buck in Florida. He died of old age. I hunted him for 3 or 4 years. He was just a giant.
That's a good point, though. Like you said, if you're uncomfortable, more often than not, that deer is going to be comfortable in that area. If you're like, that's thick, you're swatting banana spiders off you and your palmettos, that deer's like, that's where I want to be.
That's his living.
99% of hunters are like, it's too tough. I ain't going to hunt that area.
That's the places I seek out.
And, exactly.
And that deer's bedded up in that area because he's like, this is great. Nobody's coming back here.
I don't want to get too deep into it now, but I think it was Wednesday, doing a little looking around, we found one of them, sure enough, overlooked places.
Oh, yeah.
That you ought to see the buck sign there.
That's it. That's exciting, man. It's that time of year. Most of the deer in Central Florida, obviously they're already, a lot of them down in South Florida, a lot of them are chasing those.
So hard horn already, and you're like, whoa, what the heck? In rut.
Absolutely.
But you said before we started recording that the trail funneled down and went into a thick bedding area that was right up next to a road. So talk about how close you think he was laying to the road and stuff.
So the trail kind of the road went straight up and down. The trail kind of went catty corner up toward the top of this closed road.
And that was at an intersection or just a straight road?
It was just a straight road. There was no. It was kind of. It kind of led to a dead end. I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
You can't get too into detail with this kind of stuff. Because there's a lot of. If I got into too much detail, you could literally look and go, okay, that's right where he was right there. No, seriously, that's why it's such an overlooked spot, though. Because it's such a. It's. People are driving past these deer every day, but so he was. I don't know. Who knows at what point he really got up?
Yeah.
I ended up.
Got up an hour before.
Well,
yeah.
Exactly. Who knows?
You obviously couldn't do it at the time, but if I were in a situation like that on one of them sandy roads, I would have liked to have ran out there and look and see if he'd crossed the road or he actually came from right on my side of the road.
Right, and I don't disagree with that at all. But I feel like that. It's like I told you, though, in that situation, since I do believe that he was probably bedded somewhere within 50 yards of that closed road.
Yeah, probably right up next to the road.
That, there is a possibility that if I would have gone any further up that road,
could have bumped him.
That even if I didn't bump him, he could have winded me. Now, granted,
it might not affect them a whole lot. If you stay on the road, when you get off the road is when you get worried about it.
Exactly. But like I said, hard to say. But a lot of those are
that the 10-point I filmed in Zone D that I filmed or whatever.
Uh-huh.
I know he smelled me. Like I wanted him to smell me.
Right.
I came by that side of him when it was blowing right to him, but as soon as I got by him, then I came around him.
Yeah, no, I remember I watched that video. That was, but see, like a lot of people, man, they don't think that you're like, come on, man, like you really think that was necessary? But that's what it takes, man. You gotta break it down. Again, it always takes luck too, but learning those things and how to, go into every situation differently and observe, what you need to do is ultimately what's going to make you more effective, more successful you know, on a routine basis. You know, because every
It's just-
situation.
everybody gets lucky and kills a big. Well, most people, you know, will kill a big buck from time to time. But
Right.
if you're doing it every single year, just about,
Consistently putting
it's-
bucks on the ground.
you've learned some things.
But you know, and every situation is going to be unique in its own ways too. So that's why, you know, you got to be able to adapt to the, you know, different areas and sometimes even different deer. You know, deer have personalities too. You know, and like there's certain bucks that like trail, that don't mind the trail cameras, and there's certain bucks and they see a trail camera and then he don't ever come back to that camera. I've experienced that.
You can leave it there for years, you never get another picture.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I went back in there, you know, and got in that climber, you know, that I hung it right there on that trail, like right on the point of that.
You hung it midday, right?
I hung it midday about 12 o'clock.
So
And,
how far? That's a good talking point. How far were you set up from that trail? Because there's general gun when you actually killed them, right?
No, it was archery.
Archery. Okay,
Yes,
so
it was archery.
that's a good point too, because obviously with general gun you got a little more flexibility where you're hanging your stand.
So you were set up just to shoot to that trail, right?
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
and it's kind of funny too, because he actually, the trail was, you know, approximately 20 to 25 yards under me right there, you know,
Okay.
kind of coming at this angle.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, I mean, you know, not to say, I mean, he's not obviously not just going to walk a straight line the whole way, but he was like 5 yards off of the trail, you know, but he was just milling around, you know. I mean, you know, clearly the deer were using it because it was distinctive. That, I mean, it was beat down right there. You could just see the divot going through. I mean, and it was so thick, like I couldn't see far. So like, you know, the deer could have been moving slow. You know, he might have been within 100 yards. I mean, who knows how long that deer was within 100 yards, because
I've seen it multiple times, but going back to the 10-point video, you know, I actually got to watch him stand up. So for 45 minutes, you know, he only covered 70 yards.
right. Oh, and
I think they do that most days.
I believe so too. I think that when they do, especially, you know, because like that buck was clearly waiting for it to get dark. Because I shot him right at last light.
It's dark too. You got thermals and the wind, you know, the wind change, all that stuff. It affects it. Yeah.
Exactly. And you know, so like I said, who knows really how far he had moved in the daylight, but all I know is I was actually kind of somewhat getting ready to climb down. Like I was starting to kind of pack my gear out, because it was like, it was still shooting light, but I knew, and I hadn't, you know, this is a new spot. I hadn't seen no deer here, so I didn't really have much
expectation.
Exactly, and I wasn't very confident. I mean, I wasn't. I mean, I found that was a nice trail. I mean, it was a good sign I found, but I had no history, so this was a first. It was like this was a hanging hunt, you know, first time there. You know, I hadn't
That's
scouted.
honestly my most successful hunts. The first day I ever hunt an area is generally the day.
And I'm especially bow hunting. You see that, you see and hear about that a lot.
Gun hunting you can set up farther away off the trail and stuff. You don't affect the deer, but when you're getting in there for that 20-yard shot, they know you're there.
Exactly. No, absolutely. And so, like I said, I was already standing up. I was standing up. I actually took my bow. It was kind of crazy. I took my bow hanger down. You know, what was hanging on my gear.
Mm-hmm.
I literally took it down. And I have a like fairly large backpack that I take with me for hunting, because it's like a military style backpack. And I don't do the rope deal with my bow. I actually attach my bow to my backpack, and it's got like military grade clips, you know, so it's tight, and like it don't come off. Like I've been using it for 5 years now. It's a pretty sweet setup. I you know, it works for me anyway. A lot of people have their own, you know, that's preference and whatnot. But what I'm getting at here though, so I was, you know, I still had my bow ready, obviously, but I put my arrow up. I didn't even have an arrow knocked. I still had my release on, but you know, all of a sudden I hear something crunching the leaves at 40 yards, and it's just steadily walking. And I look up, and I had, like I told you, I had pretty much given up on this hunt. I mean, I had a few more minutes, but I was like, well, you know, I'm gonna start getting ready to get out of here. Yeah. You know, so I just wasn't confident.
We've all been there.
You know, and I straight up, and I look up and I see the deer approaching, and I mean, my jaw just dropped. I mean, y'all already can imagine. I'm
unprepared, and
shaking.
Like, oh man, what do I do?
Unbelievably, you know, and I mean, I said 40. He might have been roughly 50 yards when I first seen him, but it took me forever to get the arrow back out, because I had my quiver in my backpack, and I had to get the arrow out. I re-knocked the arrow. Well, it was kind of getting later, it was just I didn't have time to range it. So and I kind of had everything pre-ranged. I always range everything, so that way just in case I'm not able to range something, I have a pretty good idea. But it just this whole situation happened really fast, and I finally get my arrow on my bow, and I actually this is crazy. A lot of people probably won't even believe this, but I told you I had it was a large backpack that I now had no bow hanger to hang it on.
Mm.
So I actually put it on the rail of my climber and had to like kind of lean my hip into it so it wouldn't fall on my climber. And I mean there was no, and I mean I had to. This all happened within 10 seconds. So I put it there on my rail. It was luck that it didn't fall off, and I kind of like leaning a little bit. Just so it's just barely enough there. I said, okay, that buck's 35 yards. I'm shooting a 1-pin HHA, so I just put my dial to 35. He ended up being 32, so I was pretty close. Put my dial to 35, drew back, let him. There was one hole. It was not terribly thick, but I had one hole. I knew
Getting that late, you're probably having a little bit of issue seeing brush and stuff.
Well, exactly, and that was I mean, I knew that once he got past this one spot, I wasn't gonna I didn't have like ton of shot options once he got past me, and I mean, I didn't, he surprised me, I wasn't ready for him. He just came in on me, and like fortunately, it all worked out in my favor because I stopped him, and then I shot him as soon as I stopped him. I shot him hard quartering two, which is not the ideal shot, but I got a good amount of penetration, and ended up whacking, I don't know what it's called, but the main artery in his neck.
Mm-hmm.
The deer just dropped and bled out right there on the spot.
You didn't have to track him at all.
No track job. It was crazy because I got straight down. I know not the right thing to do, but I'm freaking out. I just shot this big buck, and he's clearly
and your first one,
right. He's dropped right here. And at the time, I mean, obviously I've been hunting Georgia forever too. But
you're going back to that and getting excited. The first real big buck, like I think he was almost 130 inches or something. That was my first big buck on public land. Over 20 years ago. But that was the same. I almost jumped out of I had to keep myself from jumping out of the tree stand. Like I was trying to come down so fast.
Especially in that situation where you're unprepared and you got the backpack here, you're ready to come down, and then
like
here he walks.
I got about half. It was a lock on or hang on stand. Yeah. I got about 8-10 feet from the ground, and I jumped the rest of the way and ran over.
No, I'm sure you were probably you had that heartbeat going, and you're stuck. Oh my gosh,
almost make you sick.
Yeah, well, and I tell you what, though, I mean, the deer, it was a very effective shot. The deer, realistically, I would say, yes, a lot of it, could have been nerves, but I mean, it's still archery hunting. It takes the deer a couple of minutes to expire. Well, I ran up to him and was about to grab him. But then, then he kind of threw his head up, and I said, "Okay, I gotta
calm down."
Kind of walked away a little bit, and I was like, "Okay, he's not going nowhere." Just I mean, but that's just because I literally got down. I mean, it was 30 yards, so it wasn't. I got down. I mean,
yeah, you probably never seen there in 35 seconds.
You probably never seen someone go down that fast.
Let it drop.
Oh yeah, no kidding. But yeah, no, so that was pretty special, man. I called my brothers and whatnot because I mean, yes, that was my first, registry buck for Florida period, but that was my biggest buck with the bow too at the time. I mean, because I had, I've been bow hunting, probably, 7 to 8 years now, and I mean, I've had some close opportunities, but it's hard, especially when you first start, man.
An inch is as good as a mile.
It is, man. I've enjoyed every process of learning more about it, man, and I still learn more every year. You learn, you make mistakes, and I try not to let I mean, yes, I get aggravated when I make mistakes, but you just gotta learn from them, But yeah, it was cool, man. I take that though as there was I would say that was about 10% skill and boots on the ground, about 90% luck. I mean,
I know what you're saying with that, but you've done so much scouting and so much narrowing it down, you increase your odds. But,
Yeah,
I mean, you know what I mean? And that's all you can
Starting
do.
in May, like you said, right? Is
Yeah,
that when you started hanging cameras and figuring them out? And,
I mean,
And it
that's all
was
any of us can do is increase
Yeah.
our odds as much as we
you
can.
didn't show up on a Friday, scout, and then hunt Saturday.
well, exactly. No, and that's absolutely right. Just the only thing that caught me off guard was, this particular spot was in the preseason scouting. It was kind of somewhere that I had overlooked, though. It was, and that ended up being where he was.
Go back to the tree stand you had passed. You said that was about 80 yards or so from you,
Uh-huh.
and ended up it was being used.
Well, so I will tell you this. I can't verify that he got out of that particular stand, but when I walked up to the deer dead on the ground, there was a flashlight walking back toward the closed road. So
So
That's pretty close. Yeah, if you can
Yeah.
see light.
so that guy had probably.
was.
I mean, we're assuming that guy was probably hunting
I
that
was
deer
gonna say hunting the
and
same
set
deer.
up 80, however far
Absolutely.
far back, and just
And
wasn't seeing him in the daylight.
it's crazy. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's what I tell everybody. And that's just like you said, going in there. You didn't want to go any farther that first day, whatever. You just didn't know the terrain, and that's 90% of hunters are doing the same thing. But I think what sets me apart is a little bit is I'll go ahead and go that extra 60, 100 yards, whatever it is, and 25% of the time I'm listening to the buck jump up and take off, and that's part of it.
It is.
But when you know as many areas as I do and have as many target bucks on camera, I really don't care that I spook that one. I can go right over here and hunt another one.
Well, exactly, and I mean that's like I said, like I mean if you kind of fast forward now, because like I was very new to public land hunting. I mean I was like I said, I put my time in, but it was still such a process. And I mean, granted, even now that I know way more, it's still very difficult. It still takes a lot of luck to get it done. But I mean, now I'm definitely a lot more confident when I go into these areas, though, because now I have all of these areas mapped out.
Yeah, you get to where you're as familiar with 10, 15, 20 different areas as you are with that one, to where you don't have to scout them. That's where you can, pick your best conditions for that spot. Not on quotas, but on open management areas.
It's a good
That's
point.
what I'll do.
If you got 15 of those areas in the same management area, and okay,
Or you tag out with $5, so you only need
Yeah.
to be successful in 5 of the 20 spots.
Exactly.
That's not much.
or if somebody's tree stands right there and you see a guy hunting, you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna go to that next spot because I got 14 other areas. So it's good to be mobile because a lot of guys I know they'll stick to one area, like you said.
Go hang on.
You've seen those 2 bucks in rut chasing does, and
No, they'll sit there every day.
I'm gonna sit here every day, and you're like, man, you got to be mobile,
Well,
'cause-
and I think that is
They're not to confuse people. There's times where you need to sit there every day.
exactly. Yeah.
Gun season, slough crossings, things like that, where every single buck that comes through the area checking does is going to cross a slough right here. That's one of those spots, and I've got a buddy that does that every single year. And that shoots us $5 from one tree, and good bucks. But every buck for 5 miles when he's coming through checking does is crossing this slough right here.
Absolutely, and that's where really, as far as like what he's talking about, though, some of that stuff you can only figure out and learn with time. Hunting an area for 5+ years, because you see, you're like, okay, this is repetitive. They do this every year, and it's just like what you said though about having multiple spots, and that's how I've learned to hunt that area more effective. And because now, the first year, like I said, we seen less deer. But now when we go in there, we almost see a deer every time we go. And part of the reason,
which should be the goal, honestly.
And there's
Darren talks about that a lot.
When I was growing up hunting with my dad, we would go, and my techniques hadn't changed. I obviously got it from my dad, but he would seek out those overlooked places, the thick, nasty places. I mean, most of the time, I don't know that he ever shot a deer over 20 yards. Most of his shots are 5 yards. He sat on the ground or would stick a little tree stand kind of 8 foot off the ground in a tree top, crazy stuff nobody did. But now that we have the maps on our phones and all this information, we can learn a spot so much faster than we could 20 years ago.
oh, absolutely. And like I said, I mean, if you fast forward now, a little bit, years, in the future, that particular bedding area that I killed that buck out of, I don't I have not gone back in there and hunted that bedding area because there's so many people lined up down it. And I don't know if it had something to do with that guy that was in there, and I don't know, maybe he seen me shoot that buck, and or, because obviously it gets posted.
There's no telling. Because I mean, I have a lot of places like that, but give it another 5 years, and there may not be anybody there for 3 years.
It goes in cycles. Yeah. Exactly.
Everything's in cycles. Like we have bedding areas where we've killed. I did a video on the one where I know we killed at least 25 bucks out of it, and right now it's completely trashed. I mean, you've never seen so many hunters in your life as packed in this little area because they know what came out of there.
Exactly.
But in 5 years, when they're not killing nothing no more, they'll disappear, gradually start disappearing. So in 8-10 years, that might be a spot I go look at, and there's nothing but moss pits again.
Exactly. But and like I said, even though I have dealt with some of those difficulties, like I seen a lot more people. There was a lot more human presence the second and third year than there was that first year.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, I think it made me a better hunter for that area too, because
it's gonna push. I mean, if all the hunters have moved to that area, then they're leaving something else open. You just gotta find what they're leaving open.
And that's what I feel, because I mean, granted, there's a lot of people. Something else that's a good topic too is a lot of people are using public land hunting for different reasons. You know what I mean? Like, there's some people that they are solely hunting on public land to put food on their table. There's nothing wrong with that. I am all for it.
Yeah.
But for me, for example, like I eat more deer meat than just about anybody.
I really don't buy any meat.
I don't. I mean, I've been growing up on it. I love it. But I've been fortunate to be in a hunting lease in Georgia. Georgia, you kill 10 does a year.
Yeah.
So
I'm not in any of them leases, but my boys are old enough now where they shoot their own deer and limit out sometimes. So that if I just shot 5 trophies, I'd still have plenty of meat. If I shot 3 trophies, I'd still
exactly. So you're not,
right.
You're not just trying to just shoot every. If you're in like my situation, like me, for example, like my main reason, and yes, if I get even if I see a 80, 90 inch 8-point. I'm still a good chance I'm still going to shoot him on public land. Yeah. Depending on the situation.
If I was where you were hunting and killed that one, I would shoot him no doubt.
Well, exactly, because they're so hard to hunt. You know what I mean? Granted, yes, I
have places I go to where I could take you out there and let you just watch 5 of those bucks in the morning.
Right.
Because there's no people out there, and they're stupid. I mean, the first day out there, a lot of times, and I don't scout those areas at all. I don't go in there unless I got a weapon, but you can go out there for the first hunt, and bucks will walk up trying to smell your boots and stuff like that. I mean, they don't know what a human is.
It's crazy, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, back to dealing with the human pressure and stuff. Like, if you're doing mainly what I'm doing, I'm looking for mature bucks. I'm not gonna say I'm not looking for trophy bucks, because we don't hunt public land to kill trophy bucks. If you want to kill trophy bucks, you go to the Midwest.
The top European right there on the second row, that little 6-point, that was a 5.5-year-old deer. That was a hard hunt. Trophy buck.
Exactly, and that's if you're like me though, you're hunting mature bucks, and it's just like you said though, with human pressure though. If I see a line of people up there, even though that first year that was where I'd put most of my time, that's where I seen most of the bucks, but I didn't want to go back in there because I seen all those people there hunting. And I said, well, I gotta move a little bit further away, and then I still had the same success and seeing deer. My brother ended up killing that big 11-point, and it was in the same area. We just had
how many deer y'all took off that place themselves? Is it just the 2, or y'all killed 3?
It's 3, and then I shot that big 9-point last year and shot him below the heart. So I had a ton of blood, man. But it was not a vital shot, and I got him on camera the next day in the daylight. The next 2 days in the daylight. And I actually had him on camera. So I shot him, way further south. But then on the next day, got the buck on camera with I got pictures of that too. I got the big hole in his side right where I shot him, about 1,800 yards from where I shot him the next morning. I think he was, it was rut again, so he was out. He was on them does, but he actually, I thought he was gonna die, just from loss of blood, because he clearly was still alive. But when I got that picture of him, he looked rough. Like, he looked like his eyes were getting droopy. And I was like, man, that deer, it might take him days, but he lost, because we trailed him and we put a dog on it. We did, even though I knew I was like, at this point, after we trailed him 1,200 yards of good blood, I was like, I was kind of hoping. I mean,
around somewhere, yeah.
I was hoping that I'd get lucky and that, he would, but I knew that the odds of it. But, we still put a dog on it regardless. The dog took us to the end of the blood, and the dog said the deer was still alive. And sure enough, was. Got him back on camera the next day, but he did end up getting shot, though. I got a picture of him. Someone, not really a buddy of mine, but someone that I met out there that I'm, he is a buddy of mine. We're not best friends or nothing. But
Shot him in archery season or gun season?
Shot him during gun season.
Okay.
Funny story, though, actually. Craziest of odds. Like, you would never believe this. But the kid, or no, I shouldn't say kid, he's, younger guy like me. But the guy that shot that buck that I wounded with the bow, he shot him, and the wound had already healed back up pretty well. Like the deer was gonna be fine. The deer was, he made it a month. The deer wasn't gonna die. The deer was, I'm sure he didn't feel good, but he was gonna live. He ended up shooting that buck during gun season. Well, if you flash back to the year before that, when my brother killed the 11 point, that same guy that shot the buck that I wounded with the bow, I wouldn't say wounded, but he grazed
the 11 point?
The 11 point with the bow. Same guy. Now, tell me, what are the...
Probably a decent hunter.
What are the odds of
you
that?
You guys got similar hunting
he's
styles.
Probably a decent hunter.
Definitely. And now granted,
I was talking to somebody about that the other day. I travel so much to hunt, there's no telling where I'll be any of these management areas. But I run into the same two guys, and I may be 6 hours away or 4 hours that way, and I'll run into the same guys. Like, what are you doing? We got the same hunting style, so we ended up finding we're always hunting the same bucks, no matter where I'm at.
Right, but yeah, so, last year was the first year that we did not check one out of there. And, I was definitely a little disappointed as part of it. I made a mistake. I made a not a good shot, and it was an easy shot too. It was 12 yards right under me. I just, rushed it and ended up, hitting him too low. And it was crazy because I at first I thought, he literally took the arrow and didn't even know he got hit. He literally walked 10 yards, but he was like, this is a mistake that I made. I'll fully admit to this. The deer sat there at it was 25 yards.
You thought he was just bleeding out?
Well, he was facing away from me, though, so it wasn't like I would have had to have, spined him. But he was just sitting there, looking back, trying to figure out what had happened, and the blood is just, pouring out of him. So I said, oh, that deer's about to just fall right in front of me. Well, lo and behold, he picked his head up, went straight, and then just galloped away. And I was like, that deer is fine. What the heck, man? It was crazy, but like I said, it was wild that, that guy ended up shooting him. I was happy for him and whatnot.
How big was he? Scoring-wise?
That one? You're talking about the one that I wounded?
Yeah.
He probably would have been maybe 95 to 100. He'd have been borderline registry. He definitely wasn't one of the big, the bigger bucks out there, but he was definitely a very, very nice deer.
The 14 point I killed up there, I forget where the guy shot him, in the neck, I think, or high in the back, but he had, which I knew about, I didn't know the guy that actually shot him, but a buddy of mine was good friends with the guy, and he's like, hey, they're out there trailing this buck now, that big one, the boy shot him with a bow, but he don't know if he can, they put dog and all that stuff. Well, start getting pictures again, obviously he was fine, and when I killed him, it was all healed up, but the guy, I think he hit him high and stuck in the offside shoulder blade or something, so he didn't hit any vitals. But that deer, there was a lot of people hunting that deer.
I can imagine, man. A lot of people don't realize it. But it's just like every time I get one of these big bucks, I try to keep it hush hush just because I don't want people to know that I'm gonna be after him.
The management area is only so big, so there's a lot more hunters than there are.
Everybody,
everybody has a picture of him.
I would say 10 to 15 people know that buck exists.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're all gonna be a little, most people.
The drop ton buck we were talking about a little bit earlier from Flying Eagle, that was one of those bucks people were just coming in here talking about, like, man, I pulled in the drive, where I'd seen that giant, but he was a young deer, stupid deer. Just had a head full of horns.
That's how it goes sometimes. But you know, to go back to like the buck that I wounded last year, you know, on that same management area, I was only hunting from this is a vehicle driving the road, and I've actually learned. I think that part of what has led me to be a little bit more successful out there and have more opportunities anyway. You know, still hard to execute it. It is. I mean, but I actually don't like to go hunt deep there. I like to run my cameras deep.
What I tell you about where you went scouting yesterday? Shoot to the road.
I like to put my cameras deep into those blocks.
And almost expect them to lay on the edge of the road.
But when it comes to hunting, I like to hunt 30 to 50 yards off the road. And this was also crazy because you know, and like this is, you know, a lot of people are against e-bikes. You know, I do have an e-bike. You know, I will tell
I
you.
don't care one way or another. Like, I'm not against them, but it's one of those things where it's not for me because I feel like I would drive past everything I needed to see. You know.
Well, so I have a little bit of a different strategy though. Well, you know, when it comes to using my e-bike anymore, especially on these management areas where I'm preferring to hunt closer to the road. You know, obviously, like I said, there's a bunch of people, and I've met people, you know, and but some of these people, you know, they know that we have harvested some nice bucks out of there, you know, and whatnot. They all had those same bucks on camera, you know, so they know. But I actually, you know, because the bikes, you know, you're not supposed to take them down closed roads. You're not supposed to drive them through the woods. But you can still drive them on a vehicle road anywhere you want, any time of the day. You know what I mean? As long as the management area is open, of course. But so I actually park my truck a mile to a mile and a half from where I'm hunting.
So your truck's not there?
So my truck's not in it because, like I said, I'm hunting 30 yards from the road.
Yeah.
And granted, I always position myself where no one's going to see me, though. I don't want to be seen. You know, that's clearly, I mean, that's what I'm getting at here. I'll see the strategy. But that day that I, you know, shot and wounded that 9-point, I parked my truck. My truck's a mile down the road. And I drive down, you know, my e-bike, and I just park it right there on the side of the road where it's hidden, you know. And I mean, obviously, I can see it, but it's that way no one else can see it. Well, there's an older gentleman that hunts in that area, and he's apparently been hunting there for 20 years. He
wasn't afraid to tell you.
Yeah, he. Well, I mean,
the hard way. He's been hunting there 20 years.
you know, I haven't had no issues with him. He just he thinks that, you know, he should be the only one hunting within a certain range of where he likes to hunt that day. You know, and I mean,
he's a public landowner, as I like to call him.
He is. I mean, like I say, he's a good dude. You know, I've helped his nephew. I literally helped his nephew drag out a buck one day. You know, his nephew, me and his nephew are good buddies, but he just don't care for me because, you know, me and him hunt very similar areas, you know, and he's been hunting there way longer than I have, obviously, but, you know, always respectful to him. But I actually did like I did one day. I parked my truck a mile away and then rode my bike down, and he parked this is the day that I shot that 9-point. He parked his truck 80 yards from me. 80 yards from me, and I watched him. It was in the morning. I watched him get out of his truck, and he walked about
on the same side of the road you're on.
Same side of the road. He walked 500 yards in there. Well, so this is I shot that 9-point that evening, the one I wounded. But that morning, he didn't come back that night. But that morning, that he parked 80 yards from me, I'm looking at his truck. Now, granted, my back is to the road. And I'm looking, this was one of the hottest deer trails I had found. I mean, there was a lot of big bucks beating down this trail. And I mean, it was right there on the road, but I knew it was, at the time, I have several other spots, like the spot where my brother, you know, because like what I've been doing is since my brothers don't scout as much as I do, I actually let them go hunt the areas that I know are producing these deer year after year. And then what I'm doing is I'm trying to learn the deer more. So I'm actually testing out new areas so I can ultimately try to find out where these bucks are going. You know what I mean? So I'm really wanting to, yes, that's a good area that's consistently producing mature bucks, but where's he going after him before that? You know, because he's doing it somewhere else too, and you just, you know, trying to narrow it down anyway. But that morning that, you know, that gentleman walked past me and went about 500 yards into the woods. It was about 10 o'clock. Thank God, he was still in the tree stand, because I take that back, it was 10:30. He was still out there in the tree stand. I had planned on hunting until 11 o'clock that day, and evidently he had too. But I turned around, And one of the biggest bucks that I have on camera out there, he's like 125-inch 9-points. The deer that he's this year. I'm thinking that he's got to be a bare minimum of 7 or 8 years old, but he's literally standing 15 yards from the guy's truck, and the guy's truck was 80 yards from me. The buck is 60 yards, and of course I thought I was going to be in good shape because my wind was blowing right toward the guy's truck. Mm-hmm. So I thought I was like, that was perfect scenario. Deer's not going to come from that way anyway. Well, lo and behold, man, that buck is 15 yards from this guy's truck, in the woods, and he's coming my direction. Like, that was what was in his mind. And I know that's what he did because I sat there and watched him for 15 minutes. And I'm sitting there, obviously, ready to go. And, he kind of like paced back and forth, left to right, left to right. Well, then he left. He literally left and went back toward the road, and I lost him for a minute. He circled back and came back around. I said, "Oh boy, he's coming. He's done." He was walking right down the trail that's 25 yards under my stand. And this was, like I said, I had an encounter with him. I was like, "Well, this is the fourth year hunting this deer. This is it right here. It's coming together." Well, he beat me that morning because he paced back and forth, and he all of a sudden, I don't know what happened. There was a lot of brush. Well, he just eventually just turned around and disappeared back into some of the.
Finally pinpointed your wind or something.
He did, and he was wanting, because I go through every possible measure to try to keep my scent down. I'm not gonna say it's scent free, but any way that I can avoid adding extra human scent to my clothes, and that can be a whole other conversation for another time or later on. But I'm doing the best I can, but obviously you're still not going to beat them every time. You know what I mean? Especially when you got a negative wind.
That's one thing I really can't do much about, because the places I'm going, I'm sure you've seen on some of the videos. I mean, I'm completely soaked. It's just dripping off my sleeves. It's just
whatever you tried to cover with the sand is already soaked and sweaty.
But yeah, like I said, he just he caught my wind and then ended up getting away. But it's just crazy because he was 15 yards from the guy's truck. I mean, you would have never. I mean, this is a vehicle road that anybody can drive their truck down, and that buck was comfortable right there. Now, granted, a lot of these areas in this management area, you're not able to see far off the road. Mm-hmm. So that's just another reason why, a lot of people overlook that. But, you can't see those. I mean, how often do you drive past those bucks that are
all the time
15 yards off the road?
Yeah, I see that a lot. You really see it when you're running dogs and stuff, because bucks always cross the road and then lay down. So, or not always, but they prefer it. So, like, if we have a buck track on this road, it's square blocks. We have a buck track on this road going east. The next road over, maybe a mile and a half. Well, he's going to cross that road, and 50 yards later, he's laying down.
I believe it, man. And like I said, that was definitely, that taught me a lot. And like I said, I kind of figured out, because my brother, it was a lot, not crazy far, but he was roughly 800 yards away from where he had killed that 11 point, and killed that 11 point 50 yards off the road. And he also, one of the other, he shot another 8 point there with his bow, 50 yards off the road in that same spot.
Yeah, they're probably expecting to be able to hear danger or, whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, again, man, like I said, it's not that because obviously the deer are using all those areas deep out, but it's obviously possible.
I think you get away with a little bit more next to the road, too.
Well, it's just
scent-wise and access-wise and everything.
You're way more likely to alert that mature buck or other deer if you're going way in there, Mm-hmm. And granted, I mean, we all know in some of these areas, like I'm calling it deep, but it's really not that deep though. It's just going in the middle of what you would call a block. And that's where, because like some of the places you hunt, like you can't go that deep in some of these places I hunt. You know what I mean? Like you can only go so far before you hit another road.
Yep.
So there's not really, honestly, in that place, in my opinion, and there's not really any deep spots. But the deepest you can get to be as far away from roads, like I said, I've just learned that as far as hunting there, most of the time you're making too much noise and stuff getting in there, and you also never know.
Yeah, that dry terrain's loud anyway.
Exactly, but you also never know. I feel like on your way in there, where exactly is he going to be on your way in there? Because if he's crossing the road frequently, he's. I mean, like you said, he could just be bedding. 100. It could be 100. He could be 300 yards off the road, but he might be 20 also.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's
I've seen countless big bucks, laying 50 yards from a main road that everybody drives or a highway. I'll see them in dog hunting areas that have a big highway going through them and stuff. We'll have them bucks a mile from the highway or something and trail them out there, and they lay down where they're just about looking at the highway.
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, man, like I said, it's definitely definitely learned a lot, man. And it's like, yes, I've scouted, but a lot of that, man. I mean, because like the deer sign is the same right next to the road as to where it is 300 yards in. You know what I mean? So being able to determine that you're going to be more effective to hunt closer to the road, you can't really determine that until you've hunted that area, over and over, and then you're like, okay, I've now learned that that's why I'm going in here. Like the first year, I told y'all, like, we were going into these spots. We were in the right spots, but we were most likely spooking these deer out, getting into our stand, so we were seeing less deer.
Yeah, and you can use that same technique where I ran into you in turkey season this year out there. The exact same thing. Hunting the road.
Really?
Right on the road.
Well,
and some guys are going deep. Everybody's going deep. Everybody parks, take the e-bike or walk or whatever, and you can climb a tree and watch the deer looking at their trucks.
Do you know what's funny though about that particular spot though? This year, I can't remember what day it was. I want to say it was after I had seen you, but I had gone back in there on a later day, and there was a freaking turkey. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was a gobbler or a hen, but it was roosting in the cypress head right across the road right there. And because I came up to my truck and I was just kind of standing in the road, just like observing, and then it just flew out, and I was like, that was crazy, man. I didn't know what it was. Like I said, it could have been a gobbler.
I've seen them roost right there.
Right there
One of the biggest bucks I ever mounted out of that management area was killed about 80 yards off the main grade.
Really?
Not far from where I saw you right there.
Right.
Well, you got any more points for the viewers? You think that they could learn something from?
I mean, well, like I said, I mean, we've kind of covered a lot as far as that goes. I mean, again, like I said, I mean, there's, so many different styles of hunting for every place.
There's multiple successful styles of hunting.
Exactly. And it's just like I said, man, we got to really just be able to adapt to all these different hunting scenarios, different amounts of human pressure. And I think a big thing though that, I think people have to stop underestimating is how far these deer are traveling though, and if you are getting a buck on camera at night and you're getting him on camera, I think the time of night could, I mean, obviously you never know. It could roughly tell you how far away he is, but it's just like, for example, like when I was getting that buck, when we've been talking about this whole video, I was only getting him on camera, 9 and 11 o'clock p.m.
So he was exiting one way and entering another.
Right. But that was, that was only, roughly 2 to 3 hours after, legal shooting light, and I ended up killing that deer a mile from there, and
I'll have deer. I think I've told you before that 8-point Tristan killed. I guess it's 2 years ago now. I had him on camera at, I can't remember now, 2:30 a.m. something like that, and killed him right at 2 miles away at 9:45 a.m. So and I mean he wasn't. It was kind of pre-rut, but he wasn't like rutting hard or none of that. It was just that was his natural pattern.
Right. And that's, another thing that a lot of people, don't really consider too is, I mean, in Florida, man, like, yes, all these areas have a time frame where you're most likely going to see rutting activity, but, I mean,
some years, like last year, it was hit and miss for a lot of places, and then where I hunt the most in Zone D my entire life, you can count January 15th, start rut hunting. That's when they're chasing, that's when they're breeding. Now, majority of it's about October 20th. Like, You know, in the past 5 years, it's gone from January 15th to October 20th.
Right.
And I'm sure a lot of that has to do with the buck to doe ratio. It's
What?
so screwed up,
Exactly. Especially in a lot of those places I hunt, because a lot of those places I hunt, they don't even allow doe harvest.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
dry years, then you won't see any rut activity at all almost, and it's like they breed from October to March. You know.
Right, but I think, another good point, that a lot of people need to really consider for like on, it's just like you mentioned earlier though about, rut hunting, general gunning. Yes, some areas you have to archery hunt the rut. They only allow you to hunt in certain times.
Yeah, we got one of them coming up. Our first hunt this year is going to be a rut archery.
Right. But so if you either way though, whether you're rut hunting, uh, or it's early season, preseason, I mean, the one thing that I will urge people, that if you're archery hunting, obviously you don't want to, like we talked about, you don't want to access areas the wrong way to where you're pushing these deer out or alarming them that you're in the area before.
They're there because it's safe, hunter pressure, so you don't want to go become all the pressure.
Right, but you do still have to you've got to put yourself in position that you're even going to be in the game to make an archery shot. Like if you're hunting a clear cut and you can see a long way, well, I mean, usually in most clear cuts, there's scattered pines, so there's usually options. I mean, you might not be able to get right where you want, but there's usually places to go, But, I mean, yes, I'm not saying, because sometimes it's even beneficial to get in a clear cut. And yes, if it's the first time you're hunting that area, you can use a clear cut as a vantage point to maybe see where the deer are crossing. But if you see them, and there's deer that are constantly walking 125 yards from you, you got to get closer.
If I'm in a situation like that, and I see all it takes one deer for me. Like if I see one shooter come out over there at 100 yards or something, as soon as he's out of sight, I'm immediately getting down, running over there and climbing that tree.
Yeah. Right. And another thing that that kind of leads back to that is just like a lot of people would probably not even consider thinking about this, but it's just like I mentioned. Yes, on for me hunting public land in Florida, I am trying to target mature bucks, but just like I mentioned in the past, that every time I've seen a deer cross the road, whether it was a small buck or a doe, those deer have led me to where these big bucks are hanging out.
I don't necessarily mark does. I may certain places I will, but just out on a road or something. A lot of times I won't mark does, but I'm marking every buck I see, whether it's a yearling button buck or a big one. I'm marking every single one.
Well, I would agree with that in most places. This particular place, like where we've been hunting these deer, the reason why I think because the doe population is so low.
And they're limited to bedding too, probably.
Well,
even the bucks and does probably bed together a lot of times.
I think so. But again,
most places
though,
I hunt that don't.
I don't really think it's as much limited to bedding, but they're limited to unpressured bedding.
That's what I mean.
You know what I mean? So yes, in a way, it's still bedding. Like they have plenty of bedding areas there, but I think it's just like what ultimately has led me to find and get closer to some of these mature bucks is that I seen these does, like for example, where I seen that really large buck and where I shot that 9-point. That spot, the year prior to that, I seen 2 does cross the road. So and it wasn't even deer season. I just marked that trail. And then the next year I went in there and put a camera in. That ended up being a just jam up banger spot. And I actually got, like I said, it clearly was getting pressure because that one older gentleman was definitely hunting in that area, but that was one of my best places as far as pictures goes. I mean,
daylight, night, or both.
Both, daylight and night. I actually had a camera 100. I had a camera here and a camera 100 yards away, and I would get different bucks on both camera. And it was crazy because one camera you can see more daylight.
You can just turn right. I was about to say that you can just turn cameras around on the same tree. I've done that multiple times. And get nighttime over here, daytime over here,
and get different pictures. But like in that particular area, I mean, I have, at least 3 to 4 deer that seemed to be 5+ years old, and I think the one deer that's the one that I've really got my eyes on, is probably going to be close to 125, 130 inches. But I probably have 8 to 10 on camera that are registry though. And now granted, I don't think they don't all bed right there, but that has just clearly been a common area for those deer to use to travel to get from point A to point B.
That's what I was talking about with the slough. My buddy that kills his 5 deer out of the same tree basically every year. That's one of those spots.
Right, and so that particular spot, if we kind of look at it now from, if you look at the puzzle from a broad spectrum, we've had a lot of luck down here in this area. Well, I killed that buck way over here, and then this new spot I'm telling y'all that maybe I don't think all these deer trout are living there, but it's such a travel. It's right in the middle. It's right in the middle. And granted, like I said, I think they're just using it because this particular little skinny route is just probably getting the least amount of pressure. And that's just why
the deer pattern us way more than we pattern them.
Right.
Scent. Just from dog hunting, I know a little bit about scent, but there's guys that study it know a lot more. But even after a rain, our scent can still be on the ground. Maybe up to 60 days. A deer could smell us. So they know for an entire hunting season. They basically know where somebody didn't go, and they trail you. I've watched them do it. I've videoed bucks trailing me up like a dog would trail you up. Nose to the ground, come right up to your feet.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They'll trail you up.
Well, and that's. One thing, and I mean, this just goes for, if you bow hunt, I mean, even private land. I mean, yes, private land deer are maybe...
It's the same animal, it's just pressure is the only thing that changes.
Right, exactly.
And private guys can shoot themselves in the foot by pressuring their piece they're hunting more than public.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, because they don't have as much room. They don't have as much room, so they're, there might be a bedding area that holds a lot of bucks, but they only hunt that one bedding area, and... I mean, it's like you said, those deer are going to start using that area at night. But yeah, I mean, if you look at the scent factor of it, I mean, something that I will throw out there just as a variable, as far as the scent goes, because like you mentioned, like that one, I think it was the 10-point you said you shot, how you act, you use the road because you knew he wouldn't smell you, even though.
Or if he did, it didn't matter.
Well, exactly, it didn't matter because he was used to that. I still believe, though, that if you're hunting close to a road,
let me stop just for a second and just go back to, we're talking about my 10-point where I walked down that road. I wanted him to come, that road was north of the deer. I wanted the deer to get up and come south because that's what the wind was, and so I'm going to walk north of the deer. If he did smell me, then he's not going that direction.
Exactly.
So and that's
the opposite way.
I mean, that's takes a lot, you know what I mean? I mean, that's, like I said, I mean, that's definitely, that was a very cool story too, those are the hunts that go down in the books, though, you know what I mean? Because it don't always work out.
I always remember. There's a lot of them I forgot, but that's one I'll remember.
I mean, it's, it was kind of the same with that one, man. Like, like I said, it was very unexpected, but definitely goes down as one of the books. But, what I was getting at as far as the scent goes, though, is, just like you said, yes, that buck was used to smelling people on that road, so.
Yeah, some places I see them, they don't care, even mature bucks don't care anything about ground scent. They'll go right across it and act like it's not even there, and I know they smell it.
But what I'm getting at is I think, though, that these deer can still, like, if they smell you on a bad wind, like, it's just like you said, they're used to the ground scent, but they might not be used, because, like, he can smell that you're in that tree right now, because, like, I've talked to some people before, and, like, there's a lot of old hat tricks. Everybody's grandfather has taught them different things, and everyone's got their own style. But I've had people mention before that they've throw out like a. So he said he went to his hunting spot, and he purposefully left items of clothing there or something, so that deer would get
old timers do that.
Used to. And I've actually considered that myself, but in my experience, though, even though that deer's going to go in there and he's going to smell that every time, but then whenever if you got a bad wind and he knows that that's an old scent and that's a new scent that's
that road up.
I'm not going to do any strategy like that.
No, I don't believe there's it's just not effective.
I talk to guys that every day they go hunting, they put a bush light in their bag, and when they get in the tree stand, they dump that bush light everywhere because they say, and I mean, they kill big bucks. I've
Right.
mounted the deer, so I know they kill big bucks.
Right.
But no, I don't think it's for deer.
No,
I mean,
no.
it might be, but I'm not doing it.
Exactly. But and I mean, something that I'll throw that I can prove that to you to a fact. And this is something I've learned, because I got, you know, hunting private land in Florida is new to me, but I got some of these neighborhood spots that I've hunted, local to us here, and I've gotten to where I mean I go, if I'm working, because it's so close to the house, I can just go. But
it's not as fun as
it's not, man. I mean, granted, it's a great place to take kids though, so I do go. I got kids that I take all the time. You seen I took that I shot a nice buck in there last year. I took that little kid with me. Because he was too young to hold a bow, but he's gonna
he'll remember that his whole life.
he will. But what I'm getting at though is like some of those suburban areas that I can hunt now. Again, like I said, I don't put all my. I mean, it's not fun to me to put everything into it because you have to put a feeder up and hunt that feeder. But the point that I'm getting at here is these deer, they live in a neighborhood. Like they smell human scent every day of their life. But
there's a difference. You step off that lawn or that road or where you're not supposed to be, and deer go running.
And that's what's crazy because like after, granted, it wasn't. It started after we killed a deer or two. Once we killed a deer or two out of there,
then they got spooky.
They started like if we didn't have a good wind, they'd smell us and they'd turn around and they'd like be like, "Oh yeah, someone's in that tree stand," and they'd turn around and they'd walk away. Now, granted, they're definitely not as elusive as a Florida public land deer.
The first deer Darren, my youngest brother, ever killed, he killed with me, and we're sitting on I think it was like a 2-year-old clear cut, and deer came out like 10 yards or something. It was gun season. He shot the deer. Well, the deer, I think he heart shot the deer, but it didn't blow his shoulders out of it, so it ran. So it runs up to a fence line and actually went to jump the fence and hung up in the fence and died going onto a neighbor's property. It was my aunt's property. And we went up there, got the deer, anything. Well, the next day I come back and I'm sitting on the ridge top where I can see that whole bottom where the deer ran the evening before when he shot it. And there's multiple deer trailing that blood up to where the deer died and back to where we were sitting and all that. And I was watching them trail it. And that's wild. I would have never thought that till I saw it.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And again, like I said, I've definitely had speculation about like the whole those strategies that people have. Because I've heard people say that, but I just hunting in a neighborhood setting like that for me, and experiencing the way those deer reacted, and even though obviously it's not the same as public land pressure, but the way they instantly reacted to just the smallest amount of hunting pressure.
That goes back to what I was talking about.
Them.
Some of those places I hunt where I'm the only human that goes in there. I mean, there might be somebody that makes it in there once every 5-6 years, something like that. It's just so hard to access. I mean, it basically takes you 12 hours to get in there. Those type of things. You'll see those deer in their natural state, but I mean, you can get away with anything. They don't associate it as being a threat a lot of times.
I believe it. I mean, that was, I have yet to go down to Zone A and deer hunt those deer. I went down there and turkey hunted this year, and I was successful. It took me 3 years, but I finally killed one in Big Cypress. But everyone knows about that place, so that's what That's just like I said, that place it's
a land of its own.
It is. But what was interesting about that place, I mean, because obviously you gotta. It's like one of those ones you have to go.
Well, we're talking about
to find them.
Which I'm planning on camping and turkey hunting this year, but we're talking about next deer season. As long as everything's going good and I can get caught up in here, going down there and camping for a week when season opens.
Absolutely.
It'd be hot and miserable, but it would be a change.
But
camp close to some water, or at least cool off every day.
Right. But what's one thing I thought was crazy? Now, granted, I've always, in my experience, I don't know what y'all's experience is, but I'm always, even on public land in Florida, I think these deer, they do know when it's not deer season, so I think that can also affect the way they react.
Yeah. One of the next videos I'm publishing on the channel is I talk a little bit about spotlight and finding deer. A lot of these mass mares wear a lot of spotlight, and I'll use that. I'll go shine all night long, and I've killed a lot. Traction spotlight is probably the two biggest ways I found bucks. Your management areas, it's legal. You
Uh,
know.
just don't have a
But
gun with you, though.
huh?
Yeah,
Just don't have a gun with you, though.
Yeah, I ain't don't have that firearm.
No, no.
But I mean, literally a day, say 3 days after general gun season closes, there's no hunting going on. You can go out there and shine, and the deer that are just, I mean, you hadn't shined a deer now in, I mean, a good buck in like 30 days. That hunting season's been going on. Just wait 3 days and go out there and shine, and you know, it's like, where in the world did they come from? There's just bucks everywhere.
Wow. I believe it, man. But it's like you said though about those, those scarce areas where deer aren't used to seeing a lot of people. Like I said, I don't know if this was because it was turkey season. It was not deer season. But we walked up. We ended up seeing
That's mostly all those deer like that, even in hunting season.
7 or 8 deer, and like they
Even the
like
bucks that stand there and look at you.
well, and like you could just tell they had no idea what we were. Like they were looking at us, and they let us get 30 yards.
Yeah, I don't know if they don't know or they just don't care. Because I've seen
Well, exactly.
when I went down there in archer season, 'cause I went 2 years in a row. The first time I went down there, that's what like I was overthinking it, you know, and I was hunting on the ground. It was flooded, and every time I tried to get in a tree, it was completely full of ants because there was no dry ground for the ants to be on, so they were up the trees. So I quit trying to get in a tree and just basically hunting on the ground, finding me a stump, sitting on whatever. But I was walk up on deer, and I was almost thinking after doing it 3 or 4 times, like these deer are so hot they don't want to run or something. Like they wouldn't run when they finally would go away from you. It'd be like they just walk away and stop, look back, and walk away. Like, what are you doing? It's hunting season, idiot.
Right.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Which I didn't see any big bucks. Biggest thing I saw was like a 6 point or something. But
Right. Yeah, I didn't see no bucks, but I wasn't a little bit intrigued about that because I see quite a few deer too.
and that's how most the bucks I'm out from down there actually got a couple in from where we were turkey hunting down there this year, and they all say the same thing. Most of them were shot. The guys were on the ground, coming and going to the tree stand and stuff, and the buck would step out of the trail, they'd get out of the truck or off the side by side and shoot the deer like he's standing there looking.
That's crazy. I was actually, I would like to go down there and do like a spot stock hunt one day. That'd be cool. I mean, I don't know if I'll be able to do it this year. I'd like to. I don't know if work's gonna allow. But that's definitely
that's the problem is I'm so busy when that season opens trying to get everything wrapped up so I can take off and go.
right.
And that's the hunting I cut is only just because I got to cut something. By the time I knock off for like zone C opens, I basically take off and I don't go back to work till after turkey season.
Mm.
So I'm off for almost 6 months this year.
Yeah.
Well, it's crazy, but I mean, if you look at the hunting zones of Florida, I mean, you can just about hunt year round for whitetails. I mean, so it's like you got to pace it.
The last hunt, like buddies of mine that get the last quota hunt here in Zone B, they're hunting bucks here, rut hunting bucks here when I'm turkey hunting Zone A.
I believe it. Yeah, because some of these management areas, that are quota
for
only.
the last week of February.
Literally. I know.
I hunt some of the late season muzzleloader hunts. I'm going to do it this year too, but some of them are. I think I have 2 this year around February 20th.
I've heard some of those places are good too. I've never experienced some myself, but I know there's
Some of my
nice
favorite
deer.
hunts. But the only problem is if the rut, if it's late season hunting, then if the rut's completely over, it's tough.
I bet.
Like it's tough.
Because it's thick, ain't it? I've drove past it. It's
Yeah.
real. It's real thick.
Yeah, you can't see anything. You're hunting close. You got to. It's just like goes back to like archery hunting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are always tough ones, no matter where you are. I mean, shoot, especially in the post rut, because I mean, at that point, those deer, are going to be most likely staying where yes, they have the least amount of pressure, but also most likely where they have the easiest access to food and water. And where they're getting their water from could be from various places.
One of the things I've learned over the past 4 or 5 years with the cell cameras and stuff is, like I was thinking, like if you had a really defined rut, say October 20th, or that 3 or 4 day period right there where it's just nothing but bucks, dog, and does, and you're hunting, you knew when the rut was. Then 30 days later, whatever does didn't get bred, you'll kind of see a little rut. Same thing 30 days later, whatever doe. Well, at the end of when you're not seeing any more buck sign, any more rutting activity, then the bucks start grouping back up. But even with a rut in October, I'm not seeing bachelor groups of bucks till the end of March. So it's not like you're hunting bachelor groups in February.
Right.
You know,
No, exactly.
you're still hunting that one long buck that's not moving.
Right.
He may move 50 yards in 24 hours. So it's tough.
Right. I don't know how serious it is or if it's even up for debate. I know people have talked about it, some of the people on the popular Facebook groups and stuff, but there's people trying to propose that they even in certain specific areas of the down south zone A, there's some deer that are even rutting like
No.
2 months, like some of them
I've been seeing
a month and a half before the season even
I've been
begins.
seeing on Facebook where they're rutting and fighting and tearing
Oh,
it
yeah.
down.
But I seen one that they posted on Lower Florida Bucks. Everyone knows Lower Florida Bucks if you live in Florida.
Mm.
Of a big 6-point hard antler chasing does. I mean, like I think it
That's
was
probably the same post.
I think it was like the end of June. The end of June, and I mean that's
wild.
I'm well beyond a month before season. I mean,
You'll
so
see fawns year round.
right, right.
Yeah, it's crazy.
They need if they they originally split the seasons up so everybody would have a chance to hunt the rut in their home turf, but the rut has changed so much over the past 10 years that they almost need to move season dates again.
I can
Like
imagine.
our Zone D season, certain areas of Zone D, I would say the hunting season's dead on, but other areas the rut's completely over before archery season even opens. Like there's absolutely no rut hunt.
Right. Yeah, and I can tell you right now, what's always amazed me though is the difference of like Zone B though and like if you look at like the bottom part of like Hillsborough County here, like there's a fine line where the rut is like it's like two different competing deer.
On one side of the road they're rutting in September, on the other side of the road they're rutting in February.
I mean, like when you look like where we are around here in this area, pretty much from here to some of the management areas we hunt, and the other ones around here, it's a zone, late rut.
We're fixing to go do an archery. Our first hunt this year is going to be a archery rut hunt, and then I'm going to go straight into a early season management area hunt. Hunting beds.
Right.
And then I'm going to go to a rut muzzleloader.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, but like what's crazy is so that if you drive 25, maybe just 30 minutes south of here, really ain't that far, but town is populated so much, you got so much more stop lines and stuff. It takes you that long, but it's really, realistically probably only 20 miles, to some of those private land spots that I am able to hunt now.
Mm-hmm.
And like granted, in those areas, you got to think though, there's a ton of does, so you're gonna have an extended rut because the bucks can't even breed all the does. But the beginning of that rut in South Hillsborough County is early October, end of September. They're pushing does, but then October 15th, they're all those bucks down there. I mean, you'll start seeing deer on the side of the road.
And then here you don't see them really chasing like around the house here till February 14th.
Exactly, and that's 20 miles difference right there. And
That's the same. That's the same difference in Highway 50.
Right.
North of Highway 50, you'll see the October rut. South of Highway 50, you're looking at a January rut, and then you can literally pick up a rock and throw it over there, and that difference.
I know that's definitely always amazed me. I don't
understand it.
I really get how that occurs.
Especially the season dates too. I mean, some of the management areas where you hunt, you go 30 minutes north of there, and the season date's completely different. You're like, okay.
Yeah, they tried to map the rut with the season dates when they did, and they did a good thing, but it's almost changed enough now they need to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I would even like some more, like we used to get a Zone B used to have the velvet hunt, the archery hunt. All the bucks, pretty much all the bucks you were shooting open a week were velvet. Now you can't do that anymore.
No, yeah.
Well, we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, good.
That's a lot.
That got long.
Yeah.
I'll have to do part 1, part 2.
Absolutely. Okay.
Well, thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to throw them in the comment box, and we'll see you on the next one.